Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Holy Bible Ministry. I've had to change my format from Facebook to YouTube. I'm having trouble with Facebook. Imagine that, right? So anyway, so I'll be doing it this way for a while. We'll be doing videos every day. Sundays, I give my weekly sermons, and Monday through Fridays we do a Bible study. Uh, Starting tomorrow, Monday, we'll be starting with Romans chapter 1. We've made it that far so far. So anyway, I just hope that y'all will make the transfer with me over here to YouTube, and things will go a little smoother here. I hope. Uh, this passage I'm fixing to put out is was requested by a friend on Facebook that I preach on it. So I prayed about it and looked at it, and I like what it's got to say. So y'all bear with me here a little bit, and we're going to get started. Uh, it's found in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. We're going to read verses 1 through 8. And I guess if I had to put a title on the sermon, I'd probably go with what it says right here on the little heading of this chapter. Everything has its time, and uh, and in life that just holds to be true. You know, everything just seems to have its season and its time, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad, and that's just the way of life, isn't it? It says to everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. So as we go through life, remember there's a time for everything. And you and I may not understand it all. And the Bible teaches us that there's a lot of things we're not going to understand until we meet God face to face, and then we'll understand a lot more. Right now, we're just incapable in this human body and our human mind. Our mind seems to interfere with our soul part sometimes, and we just have a hard time putting all the pieces together. But hopefully, this scripture we're fixing to read will clarify some of the things in life for you. It says in verse 2, it says, there's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted. And and it's so true. Uh, our life begins when we're born, and of course, it ends whenever we pass away. And so when we start thinking about the eternal aspect of life, it's just really hard for us to comprehend because everyone we know uh, that has passed on before us, they had a beginning, they had an end. Seems like everything on this earth has a beginning and an end. You know, you plant a crop, and at the end of the year, you harvest the crop. A time to plant, a time to pluck, right? Uh, so, as we're going through life, almost everything around us has a beginning and an end. Our pets are born, and our pets pass away. Uh, Loved ones are born, loved ones pass away. And so when we start thinking about the eternal aspect of life, sometimes it's just more than our mind can understand. And that's been the ultimate question of man, seems like, is how did it all begin? Uh, Different views, different ideas on all that. Of course, if you're a Christian, our viewpoint is that God created it all, and we have a hard time sometimes comprehending the fact that God has always been and He's always going to be. Something that has no beginning and no end is kind of hard for us to comprehend. But I've heard a lot of different ideas about how everything started, and even if you don't believe in God, I've come to this conclusion: nothing comes from nothing. So no matter what you believe, whether you believe this planet and solar system has always been here, or whether you believe in the Big Bang Theory, that there is a ray of light, or whatever, however they explain it, and there was an explosion and all this created itself, something had to be there. You believe more or less that something always existed. Doesn't matter if you believe it was God, a ray of light, a speck of dust, or if this has just always been and is always going to be. Whether you believe in God or not, it only makes sense in my mind that you believe that something has always been. So when you want to put it into that context, then I think for those of us who believe in God, it just makes us a little easier to believe that God was one that's always existed. So if you wonder why us Christians can so easily believe in such a concept, well, my put back to those of you that don't believe is that in the way in my logic, you have to believe something has always existed. Uh, so whatever you want to believe in, right or wrong, I mean, you believe in something. You believe something has always existed, and you pretty much believe something is always going to exist. So, but in the human mind, we just have a hard time with no beginning and no end, don't we? I mean, that's just been man's ultimate question uh, all his life, seems like. In verse 3, it says there's a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. You know, I've looked when I look at the Ten Commandments and the way that it's written, especially in the King James Version, it says, Thou shalt not kill, right? I honestly believe that should have been translated, Thou shalt not murder. Because it says right here, there's a time to kill and there's a time to heal. Uh, I believe good examples of that is when uh, an innocent life is being threatened, and there's no other way to save that innocent life but to take the life of someone who's evil. Uh, that's a justifiable time to kill. When we go to war, as unfortunate as war is, that is a time that killing has to be done. Uh, so there are times in life when uh, the unfortunate has to happen to protect others. There's also a time to heal. You know, when the wars end, it's time for the nation to grieve their loss, isn't it? We honor those that sacrifice their lives to protect our freedoms and our country and all these things. So there's a healing process we go through. There's a time to heal. Uh, if we lose a loved one or a friend, we go through a mourning process. That's our time to heal. Uh, you know, if you're sick, you take care of yourself. There's a time to heal. So there's a time to break down and a time to build up. Well, sort of like the structure of a home. You know, if you buy a piece of property that's got an old fallen in piece of uh, house on it, what do? You tear it down and you rebuild, don't you? You replace the broken with new. Same thing with us as people. When we go through the transition of what we call becoming saved, accepting that we have sinned and we want to repent of those sins and change our lives, then there's a time to break down the old person that we were and to build up the new person we're going to become. And it's really not that hard of a process if you really just put your faith out there and live on your faith. The easiest way I can explain it. You know, I remember uh, this last time that I repented of my sins and turned my life back around the way it's supposed to be, accepted the calling and everything. I remember my exact words to God were this. I said, you know what? I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll go wherever you want me to go. You can have it. You can't mess up my life no more than I have, so I'll just turn it all over to you. And you know, those were probably the best words and the best decision I ever made in my life. Uh, Every since that day, I have known more peace than I've ever known in my life. I've known more happiness than I've ever known in my life. I've known more joy than I've ever known in my life. Now, when it comes to my finances and things of that nature, I can't tell you anything's got any better. But the things that got better, you can't put a price on. You know what I'm saying? You can't put a price on peace. You can't put a price on joy. You can't put a price on happiness because all the money in the world can't buy you those things. Uh, if it could, we wouldn't have lost so many musicians and movie stars and people in the entertainment industry to suicide if money was the answer. Because they had more money than most of us could ever dream of having, but they weren't satisfied. It didn't bring them that joy, happiness, and peace that I'm talking about. So I don't know what it would be like to have that kind of money. I don't know if it would change me or not. I hope it wouldn't. But that being said, if it was going to do to me what I've seen it do to a lot of people, I wouldn't want it. Honestly, I mean, we all dream of being rich. I know we do. If you're poor like me, I mean, we all wish we had more. But there's just some things in life that money can't buy. And the thing of it is, what God offers is free. It don't cost us anything. But yet people reject it and reject it and reject it. And I feel for them. I mean, I really do, because all I can do is be honest. But I can't make anyone believe what I'm telling them. And I'm certainly not going to force what I believe on anyone. So my only answer to these people and to those watching right now is if you know me, uh, then you know how happy I am all the time. And I don't know, that's our life tell it all. So if you're a Christian and you're happy and full of peace and joy like I am, then other people are going to notice. I remember one time I was working in the factory and this lady come in one night and she was all upset. And she looked at me and she said, "You're just happy all the time." She said, "I don't know what you're taking." I said, "But you just need to start sharing it." I said, "Well, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me." She said, "Well, I might." She said, just what is your secret?" And I said, "I'm on Jesus." I said, "Get you some." I said, "It's just the love of God." She just rolled her eyes up. She says, "I don't want to hear that stuff," and just stormed out of the break room. But I was being honest. I mean, as honest as I could be, right? But in her mind, there had to be more to that. She felt like I had to be on some kind of drug or something to be the way that I am. And I told her, I said, what I got, because I seen her later. I said, "I know you don't believe me." I said, "But what I've got is free. It don't cost anyone anything." I said, "You just simply got to believe." And she said, "Well, I just can't believe all that." And I said, "Well, a lot of people can't." I said, "But all I can tell you is you're the one that pointed out how happy I am and how peaceful I am all the time. Uh, so that ought to tell you something." And I said, "And that's all I can tell you about it." I said, "I don't believe in forcing my beliefs on anyone, but you asked, I told." I said, "That'll give you something to think about, right?" So we have to break down the old person that we are so that we can build up the new person that we become. We've all got so much great potential within us. And God knows how to use that potential, but we have to give Him permission to come into our lives and build that potential up in us and become the new person we can become. It says in verse 4, there's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Well, listen, that kind of strikes home with me this week. I lost a friend Friday night, a very dear friend. I loved her to death. Young lady. If I remember correctly, I don't even think she was 40 years old yet. I believe she was in her late 30s. Uh, had a good life going. Her and her husband just bought a brand new home here at the end of last year. Uh, you know what I'm saying? Things were really going the way they wanted them to go in life. But she caught COVID and she didn't make it. She passed away Friday night. I never would have dreamed it. I still have a little hard time processing it all. So, whenever I got the news, I'm not going to lie, I wept. I cried. I mean, it literally broke my heart. Uh, Matter of fact, I mourned for her all that day. I'm probably still mourning in a sense, but it's to the point that I can deal and live with it. I mean, the mourning part. It's not got me so tore up I can't function. But Friday, when I found out, Saturday when I found out, I just, no, it was Friday. She died Thursday night. Anyway, when I found out, I wept, and uh, I had to go through a mourning process. Still am. It's getting easier, but for the most part of my time, when it says there's a time to weep and a time to laugh, for the most part of my life, if you know me, I laugh and smile a lot. I really do. I just love to laugh. I love to make people laugh. That's just a part of what I do. Uh, so there's a time to dance. A lot of us when we get happy, we might even do a little jig. Right? I've been known to do that before. Uh, get happy, do a little jig in front of the grandkids to make them smile or whatever. There's time to dance. You know, time to be happy, a time to dance, and enjoy life. Like I said, we go through different things in life, and we don't understand it all because our human minds, we're sometimes we're just not able to process it all. We don't understand why people die young. That was one of the first questions I had for God. I said, why her, a nice, good person, full of life, full of giving, a heart of gold, and young? And here I am, I'm 58 years old. I'm like, why someone that young and not someone like me or older? Sometimes life just don't make no sense to us, does it? But we just don't understand the purposes of it all. It says there's a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones. There's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. And if you've ever worked any ground or bought a place and they had a lot of stones in the yard, well, there's time to gather stones, isn't there? Because you got to mow your yard and all that good stuff. So what do? You go out and you remove all the stones that your lawnmower may hit and all that. But it also says there's a time to gather stones, and one of the first examples that comes to my mind about that is you might take them old stones you gathered out of your yard, or and you may take and put them around and make you a fire pit, or put them around your flower garden or something like that. So there's a time to throw them away and there's a time to gather them, isn't there? There's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A lot of people are huggers. They see you, and the first thing they want to do is give you a great big hug, isn't it? Nothing wrong with that. That is showing you that they love you. You got a loved one in your life, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, family member. You know, a lot of times when you're around them, you hug them and you embrace them. There's also a time to refrain from embracing. You know, uh, sometimes people have a hard time with it, and if they tell you they're not ready for it, then it's time to refrain from it, isn't it? Because they're psychologically just not ready for that yet, for whatever they're going through. I've met people like that. They have a hard time with it. Uh, they don't mean anything by it, but they're going through something emotionally, and it's just hard for them to accept. So we're to honor that, right? And leave them be. Doesn't mean that they care any less for you or anything. It's just a part of something they're going through. And when they're going through that, we just have to honor their wishes and leave it be, don't we? It says there's a time to gain and a time to lose. There's a time to keep and a time to throw away. In life, uh, especially when we think about our finances, if you live a life like I have, it seems like I've done good at times and I've done bad at times. Uh, if you want to look at this on the spiritual aspect of it, there's a time to gain. There's a time to gain God's love. There's a time to gain God's salvation. There's a time to gain God's word. And then there's a time to lose the old self. Whatever it was that your sin may be, there's a time to lose the alcohol. There's a time to lose the drugs. There's a time to lose sexual immorality or whatever the sin is you got in your life. There's a time to lose that and become the new person that you can become. Uh, a time to keep and a time to throw away. You know, uh, I guess if you want to look at the spiritual side of that, a time to keep is to keep hold of God's love, to keep hold of your salvation, to keep hold of the Word, which, in my opinion, is the Bible. That's what I consider the Word of God. There's a time, again, to throw away, and that's to throw away all the things that have distracted you in life from your salvation. It's time to throw them away, whatever it is. Like I said, if it's alcohol, throw it away, pour it down the drain. If it's drugs, throw it in the trash. Uh, you know, whatever it is in your life that's separating you from God, it's just time to throw it away. Like I said, there's a time to gaining true joy and peace and happiness. Uh, in order to grasp those things and to gain those things, you've got to throw away the things in your life that were keeping you held back, that were keeping you down. Time to throw them away. It says there's a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. You know, back in the old days, you would hear, well, even in the New Testament, you would hear about when people were mourning, how they would just literally rip their clothes, tear them, you know, uh, because they were mourning and in sorrow. I bring it on up to right now, you know, if but I don't think people sew as much as they used to, but you know, used to you couldn't afford a lot of clothes, and if you were working or whatever you were doing, and you tore a little hole in your shirt or a little hole in your pants, uh, people just used to sew them back up and keep on wearing them because, like I said, they were still good. They just got a tear in them, right? So what do? You mend them. I think that kind of applies to our life too. You know, uh, if we go out and commit a sin, we'll just call that a tear in life. It's not the end of the world. We've got a God that we can ask for forgiveness and for help to help keep us from trying to do that sin again. You know, so there's time when we tear and there's time to sow. Ask for God to help sow that area of our part up so we can stop committing this sin, whatever it is. You know. Um, there's a time to keep silent and a time to speak. When I think of that, uh, when it comes to the spiritual side of us, sometimes when people are hurting and they come to us to talk to us about things, sometimes our silence while they speak is what's needed. Because you can't listen if you're not being silent and actually listening, right? You got to listen to what's being spoken to someone that's hurting. Let them pour it out. And what I have learned is a lot of times when people are doing this, they'll talk to the point that they'll actually answer their own questions and see what the answer is to what they're trying to get off their chest and what's going on. So a lot of times it really does pay just to be silent and listen. But there's also a time as Christians to speak. Uh, we as Christians have taken the silence thing just a little overboard, I think. And what I mean by that is when we're being persecuted as a church in this country, okay, it's time for Christians to speak. And when I say speak, I don't mean be mean in your speech. I don't mean to be critical of anyone. But the things that are coming to my mind right now, let's just say this subject of uh, abortion. I personally believe abortion is wrong. Okay, so because to me, it's the murder of innocent life. It's the murder of a baby. So instead of being silent and not speaking, voicing my opinion on this, I think the church is wrong when they do that. I think the church needs to stand up and explain what's right in this matter and why we believe it's wrong and voice our opinions so that others can at least hear our side of the story and determine for themselves if they agree with us or not. You know what I'm saying? And when we do that, that doesn't mean we got to be mean to the people that may not agree with us, okay? But we need to speak our voice in a civil way and in a way that we can be heard reasonably. Because when we get mean and nasty about it, then it's hard for the word of God to get across to someone. We have to do this in a good manner. The same way with the subject of homosexuality, which really seems to be I'm just going to call it a new fad, all right, because I don't believe any of it's right. But anyway, uh, we cannot afford to remain silent about what God says about this, because if we do, then we're just allowing Satan to just take total control of things, and we've got a larger battle to deal with later on down the road. We have to make our voices heard. We can't be wishy-washy on these subjects. We have to remain strong, and it's a time to speak and let our voices be heard. When the government come in and started shutting down churches last year and persecuting churches that were trying to have church, uh, it was time for the Christians to be heard. It was time for the church to be heard, and basically tell the government, look, you're violating our constitutional right, our constitutional freedoms. You don't have the right to do this. And if we would have stood up for our rights, then, and I tell people all along, I said, so what if we'd have had to went to jail for a night or two or paid a fine? Man, look at what the apostles had to go through. If any of y'all are following my Bible study or were following my Bible study on Facebook, now it's going to be here on YouTube. If y'all been following my Bible study, those Christians were persecuted. They were stoned. They were beaten. They were imprisoned. They were killed. We don't have to go through anything like that here in the United States, but they did. So there's a time to speak. And the last verse says there's a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. We are instructed as Christians to love everyone. And I believe that. I believe we're to love everyone. But we're to hate the sin, because God hates the sin. And there's nothing wrong with hating the sin. But don't confuse the hate of the sin for the hate of the person. Love the person. Love, love, love that person. Because we all make some kind of mistakes. Some make worse mistakes than others. So love the person, but hate the sin that they're stuck in. And if you can learn to hate the sin but love the person, then maybe you can help the person. Not all of us can save the world. We can't help everyone. I understand that. But there are some people we can get through if we can overcome the hate of their sin enough that we can still love the person and try to reach them and get through to them. So, yes, there's a time to love. I believe in loving everyone, but I definitely believe in hating the sins that are committed, because sin is just ungodly, right? And So we have to hate the sin. We even have to hate the sins that we commit ourselves. That's kind of what helps keep us from doing them over and over. That and our love of God, right? We love God so much that we're doing our best not to displease Him. Not because we fear some eternal punishment, and we do. Don't get me wrong, we do. I think everyone should. But that shouldn't be the main factor to worship God. The main factor to worship God is because once you get to know Him, is because you love the idea of pleasing your Father, right? Just like you would, your Father here on earth. Uh, so there's a time of war and there's a time of peace. So wars are going to happen. That's they've been going on since the Old Testament, and they'll continue to go on until Jesus returns. Off and on through life, I mean, that's just a part of it. It's going to happen because people disagree on things, and countries are made of people of different opinions than what other countries have, and wars are going to happen. But when the war is over, there's also a period of peace. And we've seen periods of peace, and periods of peace are a good thing. Enjoy them while they last. And even in our own lives, we see periods of peace. We also see periods of war in our own life because we're warring with different things, right? Of our own temptation. We war with that. But it seems like we also go through periods of time where we don't seem to be tempted as much. It's just like a period of peace, and enjoy those times when they come. So that was my sermon for the day. I hope you enjoyed it. That was actually a pretty good little read, wasn't it? I'm glad the lady asked me to talk about it. Tomorrow night, tomorrow Monday. I'm used to going live every night. Anyway, tomorrow Monday, we'll be looking at Romans chapter 1 for our Bible study. I hope you'll join us. I'll post these videos every day. And y'all just pray for me, pray for this ministry, and have a great Sunday, a great Monday, and I'll see y'all again tomorrow. Bye.